The massive doors of the Galactic Senate chamber opened with a deep hum that echoed through the vast space. Ambassador Sarah Chen walked through them, her black diplomatic uniform a sharp contrast against the rainbow of alien forms that filled the circular chamber. Behind her, Commander Marcus Torres carried a slim datapad that held months of careful work. Sarah had been preparing for this moment for over a year. The proposal she was about to present could change everything for humanity and the galaxy. She looked up at the towering ceiling where holographic displays showed the current session number and agenda items in 47 different languages. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering. 847 species called this place their political home. The seats were designed to accommodate every possible body type imaginable. Some delegates sat in pools of specialized liquid, others hung from crystal formations that grew from the ceiling. The energy beings existed as controlled fields of light that pulsed gently in their designated spaces. Sarah took her place at the central speaking platform. The translation matrix hummed to life around her, a complex web of technology that would convert her words into every language and communication method used by the member species. She had practiced this speech dozens of times, but standing here now, surrounded by beings who had been traveling between stars when humans were still learning to make fire, she felt the weight of representing her entire species. "Honored delegates," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems, "I come before you today with a proposal that could benefit every member of our great alliance." She activated her datapad, and the central holographic display came to life. A three-dimensional map of known galaxy appeared, showing trade routes, defense positions, and resource distribution in glowing lines and dots. For too long, our species have worked separately, each using only our own strengths while our weaknesses remain unprotected. I propose we change this with the Mutual Defense and Resource Sharing Initiative. The display shifted, showing a complex network of interconnected systems. Sarah had spent months creating this presentation, working with human analysts to identify exactly how each species could contribute to a greater whole. "Every species in this chamber has unique gifts," Sarah continued. "The Zephyrians have the fastest computational networks in known space. Their crystal-based processors can solve problems in minutes that would take our computers days." A section of the display highlighted the crystalline beings who sat in formations that resembled living diamonds. Several of them pulsed with what their species used as acknowledgement. The depths have sensory equipment that can detect ships and anomalies from distances we cannot imagine. Their deep space monitoring systems are unmatched. The aquatic depths, floating in their specialized water-filled chambers, created gentle ripples that indicated attention. The lithoids can build structures that last for millennia. Their engineering knowledge could help us create permanent installations that would serve generations. The rock-based beings shifted slightly, their boulder-like forms making grinding sounds that the translation matrix identified as interest. "Humans bring something different to this alliance," Sarah said. Knowing this was the crucial part of her presentation. "We are coordinators. We see patterns. We can take all these individual strengths and weave them together into something stronger than the sum of its parts." The display now showed detailed tactical scenarios. Human fleet formations worked with Zephyrian computational support to predict enemy movements. Depth sensors provided early warning while lithoid defense platforms protected key positions. Each species contributed what they did best while covering the weaknesses of others. "Look at these simulation results," Sarah said, highlighting a series of battle scenarios. "When human tactical coordination combines with Zephyrian processing power, our response time to threats improves by 400%. When Depth's early warning systems work with human pattern analysis, we can predict pirate raids 3 weeks before they happen." She moved to the next section of her presentation. "This is not about human leadership. This is about human coordination. We have spent our entire history learning to work together despite our differences. On our homeworld, hundreds of different cultures and nations learn to cooperate. We can help other species do the same thing on a galactic scale." The chamber was quiet as delegates considered her words. Sarah could see various species communicating among themselves in their own ways. The bird-like Aryans clicked their beaks rapidly. The mantid collective's insect-like representatives touched antennae together. The energy beings pulsed in synchronized patterns. "The benefits would be enormous," Sarah continued. "Trade efficiency would improve by at least 60%. Defense costs would drop while security increased. Scientific research would advance faster as we share knowledge more effectively." She brought up specific examples. The agricultural crisis in the Outer Rim could be solved by combining mantid biological knowledge with human farming techniques, and lithoid soil engineering. The piracy problem in the neutral zone could be ended by coordinating depth detection, Zephyrian analysis, and human tactical response. The presentation continued for another 20 minutes as Sarah detailed every aspect of her proposal. She showed economic projections, defense scenarios, and scientific advancement possibilities. Every number had been checked and rechecked. Every scenario had been tested in simulation. This initiative would create a true alliance, Sarah concluded. Not just a collection of species who happen to share the same galaxy, but a unified civilization that protects and supports all its members. The holographic display faded, leaving Sarah standing alone at the center of the chamber. For a moment, there was complete silence. She had done everything she could. The proposal was solid, the benefits were clear, and the implementation plan was detailed and realistic. Then the laughter started. It began with Hegemon Prime Minister Vextar, whose species resembled giant praying mantises. His mandibles clicked together in a rapid pattern that the translation matrix identified as amusement. The sound was sharp and metallic, echoing through the chamber like scattered coins hitting stone. Council Speaker Blobthune joined in next. The gelatinous being's entire body rippled with what passed for laughter among his people. The ripples created waves in his transparent form that caught the chamber's lights and threw dancing patterns on the walls. Soon the entire chamber filled with the sounds of 847 different species expressing amusement. The Aryans clattered their beaks in rapid rhythms. The lithoids created grinding sounds like rock slides. The energy beings flickered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Even the usually silent robotic delegates from the Machine Collective emitted series of beeps and electronic static that their translation protocols marked as humor. Sarah stood motionless at the center of it all. Commander Torres stepped forward as if to say something, but she raised her hand slightly to stop him. Her face showed no emotion as she waited for the laughter to die down. Finally, Speaker Blobthune's voice cut through the noise. "Oh, humans," he said, his words rippling with continued amusement. "Always so eager, so optimistic. Your species has been traveling between stars for what, 200 years? Some of us have maintained galactic order for longer than your civilization has existed." Prime Minister Vextar's mandibles clicked again. Perhaps the humans should focus on learning to manage their own single star system before they presume to coordinate civilizations that were ancient when their ancestors were still discovering how to make fire. The laughter resumed, even louder than before. Sarah felt the weight of every eye, sensor, and attention-focusing organ in the chamber. She had expected skepticism, perhaps some resistance to change. She had not expected this level of dismissive mockery, but she maintained her composure, standing straight and calm at the center of the storm of alien amusement that surrounded her. The laughter continued for several more minutes before gradually dying down to scattered chuckles and amused comments. Sarah Chen remained standing at the center of the chamber, her expression calm and professional, despite the mockery surrounding her. She had represented humanity in difficult situations before, but nothing quite like this. Senator Krilox of the Mantid Collective rose from his specialized seating area. His 6 legs clicked against the chamber floor as he positioned himself to address the assembly. His compound eyes, each the size of a human fist, gleamed with what could only be described as condescension. "Honored Speaker," Krilox began, his voice carrying the characteristic buzz that all mantid species shared, "I must respectfully question whether we should waste any more of this august body's time on such ambitious proposals from our newest members." More chuckles rippled through the chamber. The mantids were known for their diplomatic language, but everyone understood the insult beneath the polite words. The humans speak of coordination and pattern, recognition, Krilox continued, his antennae twitching with amusement. Yet their own planet spent millennia in constant warfare before they achieved even basic planetary unity. They suggest teaching cooperation to species who have maintained peaceful alliances since before their sun began burning. Senator Thivan of the Psionic Collective floated forward in her energy bubble. Her species appeared as vaguely humanoid shapes made of flowing light, and when she spoke, her words seemed to come from inside the minds of every delegate present. "The human proposal assumes we require their assistance," Thivan said, her mental voice carrying undertones of polite disdain. "Yet we have successfully managed galactic affairs for over 50,000 years. Our trade routes operate efficiently. Our defense systems have prevented major conflicts for centuries. What exactly do the humans believe they can improve upon? Delegate. Morthak of the Silicate Union scraped his rocky appendages together, creating a sound like grinding stone that his species used for emphasis. The humans have existed in space for less time than it takes our people to complete a single growth cycle. They have visited perhaps 30 star systems. We have settlements in over 12,000. The chamber erupted in another wave of laughter. Sarah noticed that even some of the typically neutral robotic delegates were emitting the electronic equivalent of chuckles. Admiral Zexkor of the Aquatic Federation surfaced in his water tank, creating ripples that indicated strong emotion. Through the translation matrix, his words carried the weight of ancient authority. The depths have been monitoring space for threats since before mammals existed on Earth. Our sensor networks span half the galaxy. What patterns could humans possibly detect that we have missed? Sarah felt Commander Torres tense beside her. She knew he wanted to respond, to defend humanity's achievements and capabilities, but she also knew that anything they said now would only generate more mockery. High Counselor Vextar clicked his mandibles again, the sound sharp and dismissive. Motion to table indefinitely the human initiative, he announced. All in favor? The response was immediate and overwhelming. Appendages, tentacles, energy signatures, and various other forms of agreement rose throughout the chamber. Sarah watched, as every visible delegate indicated their support for dismissing her proposal. The vote counter displayed the results in glowing numbers: 847 in favor of tabling, 0 opposed, 1 abstention. Sarah realized the abstention was her own vote. Even the human delegation's allies had voted against them. Furthermore, Counselor Thivan added, her mental voice now carrying an edge of superiority, perhaps humanity should consider that their membership in this body was granted as a courtesy, not as recognition of equals. The Galactic Senate welcomed Earth as we would welcome any developing civilization showing promise. But developing civilizations observe and learn. They do not presume to lecture their elders. The insult was clear and deliberate. Several delegates made sounds of approval. The energy beings flickered in patterns that translated as agreement. Even the usually stoic machine collective emitted brief electronic chirps of concurrence. Senator Grauthon of the crystalline hegemony resonated with harmonics that created beautiful but dismissive tones. The humans mistake inclusion for equality. A child may sit at the adult table, but that does not make them qualified to plan the family's future. More laughter followed. Sarah noticed that some delegates were now openly discussing her proposal, among themselves, pointing at various aspects of her presentation data that still glowed on the chamber's displays. But their discussions were clearly mocking rather than serious consideration. The computational requirements alone, buzzed one Zephyrian to another, show they do not understand the complexity of our systems. Their tactical scenarios assume response times that ignore basic physics, clicked an Aryan delegate. The resource allocation models would bankrupt half the galaxy, rumbled a lithoid representative. Sarah listened to the critiques and realized something important. The delegates were not actually addressing the merits of her proposal. They were dismissing it based on assumptions about human capabilities, rather than examining the specific plans and data she had presented. But she also understood that pointing this out would accomplish nothing. The Senate had made their decision based on prejudice rather than analysis, and no amount of argument would change their minds in this moment. Speaker Blobthun's gelatinous form rippled again as he prepared to formally close the discussion. The matter is settled, he announced. The human proposal is tabled indefinitely. Perhaps our human colleagues will use this time to observe how galactic civilization actually functions before proposing such sweeping changes. The dismissal was complete and final. Sarah felt the weight of failure settling on her shoulders. Months of work, careful planning, and hope for a better future had been rejected without serious consideration. But as she looked around the chamber at the smug expressions and amused body language of the delegates, she felt something else growing inside her. Not anger exactly, but a cold determination. The Senate had made their choice. Now humanity would make theirs. Sarah gathered her materials with deliberate care. She powered down her datapad and tucked it under her arm. Commander Torres moved to follow her lead, his jaw set with barely controlled frustration. The human delegation withdraws the proposal, Sarah announced clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. We thank the Senate for their consideration. She turned and walked toward the chamber doors with measured steps. Torres followed, and behind them, the laughter resumed. But this time Sarah noticed it sounded somehow less confident, as if some delegates were beginning to wonder whether they had missed something important. The massive doors closed behind them with the same deep hum that had announced their arrival, but everything had changed in the space of 1 hour. The galaxy would never be quite the same, though the delegates laughing in the chamber behind them did not yet understand why. 3 days after the Senate session, maintenance worker Kleetak noticed something unusual as he cleaned the diplomatic quarters on Station Alpha 7. The human embassy section, which had buzzed with activity for months, was strangely quiet. He pressed his auditory sensors against the door and heard nothing. Inside, the human diplomats worked with quiet efficiency. Ambassador Chen moved through the embassy quarters, checking that all classified materials were properly secured or destroyed. The walls that had once displayed star charts and alliance proposals now showed bare metal. All communication equipment has been wiped and packed, reported communications. Officer Lisa Park. Her voice was calm, professional, showing no trace of the anger that many humans felt after the Senate's dismissal. Scientific equipment? Chen asked. Dr. Vasquez finished transferring the data yesterday. Everything is ready for transport. Commander Torres supervised the loading of the last containers. Each box was labeled simply Earth Diplomatic Corps, with no indication of where it was going next. The human staff worked without conversation, their movements precise and purposeful. Across the station, Dr. Elena Vasquez visited the Zephyrian research laboratories where she had worked for the past 8 months. The crystalline beings hummed with computational activity as she approached their central processing cluster. Dr. Vasquez resonated primary researcher Cristal, her harmonic voice carrying pleasant undertones. Are you here to continue our work on quantum field analysis? I am here to inform you that the Human Scientific Exchange is terminating our collaborative projects. Elena replied simply. Thank you for the opportunity to work together. We are redirecting our resources to internal research initiatives. The harmonic frequency from the Zephyrian cluster shifted to confusion. Terminating? But our joint research has shown remarkable progress. The quantum resonance patterns we discovered could revolutionize faster than light communication. I understand. However, humanity has decided to focus our scientific efforts elsewhere. Elena handed over a data crystal. This contains all our research contributions to date. You are welcome to continue the work independently. Elena left the lab without further explanation. Behind her, the Zephyrian researchers buzzed with confused harmonics, trying to understand why the humans would abandon such promising research. Similar scenes played out across dozens of stations and colonies. Human traders quietly completed their current contracts but made no new agreements. They filed proper departure notices with port authorities and paid all outstanding fees, but offered no explanations for their sudden change in business patterns. Captain James Morrison of the merchant vessel New Horizon finished unloading his cargo at Trade Station Gamma 12. The manted port officials processed his paperwork with their usual efficient clicking and buzzing. Captain Morrison, buzzed Port Controller Ziktak, your manifest shows this as your final scheduled run to this sector. Will you be establishing new trade routes? No planned routes at this time, Morrison replied. The New Horizon will be returning to Earth space for reassignment. Reassignment to where? Ziktak's compound eyes showed curiosity. That information is not yet available, Morrison said politely. The manted controller's antennae twitched with mild annoyance, but Morrison's paperwork was complete and legal. There was nothing to prevent his departure. In the neutral zone, Admiral Jackson Hayes received a priority transmission from Earth Command. He read the orders twice before calling his senior staff to the briefing room aboard the flagship Endeavour. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Hayes began, we have new orders. All human vessels are to withdraw from joint patrol duties and report to designated coordinates for training exercises. Commander Sarah Mitchell, his tactical officer, raised her hand. Sir, what about our commitment to the Galactic Defense Force patrols? We're scheduled to cover Sector 7 for the next 3 months. GDF Command will be notified that we are unavailable due to training requirements, Hayes replied. All current operations are to be concluded within 72 hours. The staff exchanged glances. These were not normal training exercises, but Hayes offered no additional explanation. Across human space, similar orders went out. Trade vessels changed course. Research teams packed their equipment. Diplomatic missions filed departure papers. In every case, the explanations were polite, professional, and minimal. The first aliens to notice the pattern were the traffic controllers at major space stations. Supervisor Morglex of Deep Space Station 9 reviewed the departure logs with growing confusion. 12 human vessels departed yesterday, he noted to his assistant, a young Aryan named Chirpak. That is unusual for a single day. Perhaps they are coordinating some kind of trade mission, Chirpak suggested, her feathers ruffling with uncertainty. Without filing proper trade mission paperwork? Humans are usually very careful about documentation. At Galactic Defense Force headquarters, Admiral Thexvar of the Aquatic Federation reviewed patrol. Reports from the neutral zone, his water tank bubbled with confusion as he processed the information. The human fleet has withdrawn from all joint operations, he reported, to the Defense Council. They cite training exercises but provide no timeline for return to duty. General Voxtar, Prime Minister Vextar's military cousin, clicked his mandibles dismissively. Let them train. Their tactical contributions were minimal anyway. We maintained galactic security for millennia before they arrived. But some officers were beginning to worry. The humans had been assigned to the most difficult patrol sectors, areas where their unusual tactical thinking had proven surprisingly effective at dealing with pirates and smugglers. Lieutenant Commander Sealoth of the Crystalline Hegemony accessed patrol efficiency reports from the past 6 months. The data showed something interesting. Sectors with human tactical support had 30% fewer incidents than similar areas patrolled by other species. She brought this to Admiral Thexvar's attention, but he was not concerned. Correlation does not imply causation, he bubbled. Those sectors may simply have had less criminal activity recently. As the second week began, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every human presence in galactic space was quietly disappearing. They maintained communication with traffic control and followed all regulations, but they were clearly leaving. The strangest part was how polite they remained. When asked direct questions about their departure, humans gave simple, honest answers that revealed nothing about their intentions. They were returning to Earth space. They were concluding their current assignments. They had no immediate plans for return. At the Galactic Senate, Speaker Blobthun received a formal notification from the human embassy. Ambassador Chen was returning to Earth for consultations. A skeleton crew would maintain the embassy, but all active diplomatic initiatives were suspended indefinitely. Perhaps they are sulking, suggested Senator Krillox when informed of the situation. Young species often react emotionally to diplomatic setbacks. But privately, some senators were beginning to wonder if they had missed something important. The humans had not protested their treatment in the Senate. They had not demanded reconsideration or threatened retaliation. They had simply left. By the end of the third week, human space was eerily quiet. Ships still moved between Earth's colonies, but no human vessels operated outside the Sol system and its immediate neighbors. The busy traffic that had characterized human expansion for the past 50 years had simply stopped. The galaxy continued to function without them. Trade routes operated normally. Defense patrols maintained their schedules. Scientific research proceeded in laboratories across hundreds of worlds, but a few careful observers noted small changes. Response times to incidents were slightly longer. Some trade routes seemed less efficient. Certain research projects moved more slowly without human participants. Most aliens dismissed these changes as insignificant variations in normal operations. After all, humans had been part of galactic civilization for less than a century. How much difference could their absence really make? They were about to find out. 6 months after the humans departed, Captain Mordex of the Galactic Defense Force patrol ship Star Guardian received an urgent distress call from a merchant convoy in the Outer Rim. His ship was currently 3 hours away from the reported position, pirates. Again, growled his tactical officer, Lieutenant Zekar. That's the 4th attack this month in Sector 7. Mordex studied the tactical display with growing frustration. Wasn't Sector 7 one of the areas the humans used to patrol? Yes, sir. But General Voxtar said their contributions were minimal. Minimal. Mordex repeated grimly as he ordered maximum speed toward the convoy. They arrived to find 2 merchant ships destroyed and the others scattered. The pirates had vanished into the asteroid fields that honeycombed this part of space. Similar reports were flooding in from across the Outer Rim territories. Pirate activity had increased by over 300% in the 6 months since human patrols had withdrawn. The remaining GDF forces were stretched thin, trying to cover areas that had been peaceful for years. Admiral Thexvar floated in his command tank, reviewing increasingly alarming statistics. His aide, Commander Silthea, waited patiently as he processed the data. "The patterns make no sense," Admiral Thexvar finally bubbled. "These pirates are hitting targets we never anticipated they would choose. Their timing seems almost coordinated. Sir, should we request additional ships for the Outer Rim? From where? We are already operating at full capacity." What the Admiral didn't know was that the pirates were following the same patterns they had always used. The difference was that human tactical analysts were no longer there to recognize and predict those patterns. The seemingly random attacks actually followed clear mathematical progressions that humans had spent months learning to identify. On the Zephyrian homeworld, primary researcher Crystal worked frantically to solve a growing crisis in the crystalline computational networks. The massive crystal formations that served as living computers were developing what could only be described as processing errors. "The quantum resonance equations are becoming unstable," she reported to the High Council. "Our computational efficiency has dropped by 23% over the past 4 months." Council leader Harmon's crystalline form pulsed with concern. "What is causing these errors?" "We cannot determine the source. The mathematical models that we have used for centuries are suddenly producing irregular results." What Crystal could not know was that human. Researchers like Dr. Vasquez had spent months identifying tiny harmonic irregularities in the Zephyrian systems. The corrections they had quietly implemented were no longer being applied, and the small errors were compounding into major problems. The crisis was not limited to the Zephyrians. Across the galaxy, systems that had operated smoothly for years were beginning to show strain. Trade coordinator Blickstar of the Merchants Guild stared at shipping reports that made no sense. "Delivery times have increased by an average of 18%, he reported to the Guild Council. "Some routes that used to take 3 days now require 5. Are there new obstacles? Pirate activity? Navigation hazards?" "No, nothing like that. The routes are the same, but somehow less efficient." The humans had not built the trade routes, but they had spent years analyzing traffic patterns and suggesting small adjustments. A slight change in departure timing here, a minor course correction there. The improvements had seemed insignificant individually, but together they had optimized the entire system. Senator Krillox faced his own crisis on the Mantid homeworld. The quantum-grown agricultural systems that fed billions of his people were failing. Plants that had grown successfully for generations were withering, despite perfect environmental conditions. "The biological matrices are unstable," reported Chief Agriculturalist Thuven, her antennae drooping with exhaustion. "We have tried every solution in our databases, but the crop failures continue to spread." What changed? "These systems have worked for thousands of years. Nothing changed, Senator. That's what makes this so confusing, but something had changed. Human biologists had identified subtle imbalances in the Mantid growing systems and suggested minor adjustments to soil chemistry and growth hormones. The Mantids had implemented these suggestions because they improved yield slightly. Now, without those tiny corrections, the systems were slowly destabilizing. The most alarming development came from the Deep Space Monitoring Network. The depths, with their unmatched sensory capabilities, had always provided early warning of threats from unknown space. But their reports were becoming increasingly unreliable. Sensor technician Glubpar emerged from his monitoring pool with disturbing news. "The deep space sensors are detecting massive object movements in the void regions," he reported to Station Commander Wavron. "Object movements? What kind of objects?" "Unknown. The sensor returns are confused. What we thought were cosmic background radiation appears to have been masking something much larger." Commander Wavron's tentacles writhed with concern. "How long have these objects been moving?" "Based on the sensor logs, approximately 18 months. 18 months. Right around the time the humans had departed from galactic civilization. The terrible truth was beginning to emerge. The energy signatures that human-designed sensors had been detecting and classifying as cosmic background fluctuations were not natural phenomena at all. They were massive fleet movements from regions of space that most species considered uninhabitable. Humans had been tracking these movements for months, building mathematical models to predict their patterns. But when humanity withdrew from galactic affairs, they had taken that knowledge with them. The unknown fleets were now moving into position around key systems, and the Galactic Defense Force had no idea they were coming. Emergency alerts began flooding into GDF headquarters. Scout ships reported massive energy readings in supposedly empty space. Long-range sensors detected fleet formations moving through regions that had been dark for millennia. Admiral Thexvar called an emergency meeting of the Defense Council. Representatives from every major species gathered in the secured chamber, their usual confidence replaced by obvious worry. "We are facing an unprecedented situation," the Admiral announced. Long-range sensors indicate the presence of unknown fleets in at least 17 different sectors. The formations are massive and appear to be moving in coordinated patterns. General Voxtar's mandibles clicked nervously. "Coordinated? You mean they are working together?" "That is our assessment. Furthermore, preliminary analysis suggests these fleets have been in position for months, possibly years. We simply failed to detect them until now." The room filled with the various sounds that different species made when expressing alarm, but one council member remained silent. Admiral Zexkor of the Aquatic Federation floated motionless in his tank, reviewing data on his personal display. "Admiral Zexkor?" prompted Admiral Thexvar. "Do the depths have additional sensor data?" "Yes," Zexkor replied slowly. "And it is disturbing. Our deep space monitoring logs show these energy signatures have been present for over 2 years. But they were classified as background radiation based on analysis protocols that we borrowed from human researchers. The implication hung in the chamber like a toxic cloud. The humans had known about the unknown fleets. They had been tracking them, analyzing them, preparing defenses against them. And when the Senate had laughed at their proposal for coordinated defense, humanity had quietly taken that knowledge with them. Senator Krillok spoke the question that everyone was thinking: where are the humans now? But nobody had an answer. Human space had gone completely dark 6 months ago. No communications came from Earth. No human ships traveled the traditional routes. It was as if humanity had simply vanished from the galaxy. The unknown fleets continued their slow, inexorable advance toward inhabited space, and the Galactic Senate finally began to understand what they had lost when they dismissed humanity's offer of cooperation. The galaxy's greatest crisis in 50,000 years was approaching, and the species that might have helped coordinate a defense had gone home in silence, taking their pattern recognition abilities and tactical coordination with them. The Senate's laughter was beginning to sound like a very expensive mistake. 18 months after the Senate session that had ended in laughter, Ambassador Sarah Chen stood once again in the Galactic Senate chamber. But this time the atmosphere was completely different. Gone was the confident chatter and casual dismissal that had greeted her previous visit. The delegates sat in tense silence, their attention focused on the massive tactical displays that showed the true scope of the crisis facing galactic civilization. The unknown fleets had revealed themselves completely now. Hundreds of massive ships emerged from the void regions, their technology unlike anything the known species had ever encountered. They had already taken control of 7 star systems, and their advance seemed unstoppable. Speaker Blobthun's gelatinous form had lost its usual luminescent confidence. When he spoke, his words carried undertones of barely controlled desperation. "Ambassador Chen, we are grateful that you accepted our invitation to this emergency session." Sarah looked around the chamber, noting the changes that 18 months had brought. Many seats sat empty as delegates dealt with crises in their home systems. The ones who remained looked tired, worried, defeated. The arrogant confidence that had once filled this space had evaporated. "The Galactic Senate faces unprecedented challenges," continued Speaker Blobthun. "Perhaps we were hasty in our previous assessment of certain proposals." Prime Minister Vexitar's mandibles twitched nervously, rather than clicking with amusement. "The unknown fleets possess tactical capabilities that we cannot counter effectively. Our traditional defense strategies have proven inadequate." Admiral Thexvar projected his voice from his water tank, the bubbles betraying his agitation. "Ambassador Chen, the Galactic Defense Force has suffered 7 major defeats in the past 4 months. We cannot predict their movements or counter their strategies." Sarah listened to their admissions without expression. Behind her, Commander Torres maintained the same professional demeanor, though she knew he was thinking about the months of preparation that had led to this moment. Senator Krillok rose on his 6 legs, his compound eyes no longer gleaming with superiority. "We have reconsidered the value of different perspectives in military planning. Perhaps human insight into these matters would be valuable. The agricultural systems on 12 worlds are failing," added another delegate. "Trade routes that functioned for millennia are breaking down. Our computational networks are experiencing cascading errors." Sarah finally spoke, her voice calm and clear. The human species appreciates the Senate's invitation to this session. However, our current commitments to our own security and development preclude external involvement. The chamber filled with a very different kind of silence than the one that had greeted her 18 months ago. This was not the silence of dismissal, but of growing panic. "Ambassador," Speaker Blobthun said carefully, "surely humanity recognizes the threat these unknown fleets pose to all civilized species, including Earth?" "Humanity is aware of various threats in the galaxy," Sarah replied. "We have taken appropriate measures to ensure our security." What she did not say was that those measures had been under development for over 2 years. While the Galactic Senate had been laughing at human proposals, human scientists and military planners had been analyzing the unknown fleet movements and developing countermeasures. Senator Thevan of the Psionic Collective floated forward, her energy form flickering with agitation. "The Senate acknowledges that certain misunderstandings may have occurred in our previous interactions. Perhaps those issues could be addressed." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Misunderstandings are indeed unfortunate. However, humanity has learned that effective cooperation requires mutual respect and recognition of each party's contributions. She paused, letting her words sink in. "We have found that when civilizations work together, combining their unique strengths and respecting each contribution, remarkable things can be achieved." The irony was not lost on anyone in the chamber. Sarah was repeating almost exactly what she had said 18 months ago, when the Senate had laughed at her proposals. What would humanity require for renewed cooperation? Asked Admiral Thexvar carefully. "That is an interesting question," Sarah replied. "Unfortunately, humanity's current obligations make such discussions premature." Commander Torres stepped forward and handed her a datapad. Sarah glanced at it and nodded. "I have just received an update from Earth Command," she announced. "It appears that several independent systems have approached humanity regarding mutual defense agreements. The Centauri Republic, the Free Worlds Alliance, and the Outer Colony Federation have all expressed interest in cooperative arrangements." The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs. These were systems that had remained neutral in galactic politics, neither fully aligned with the Senate nor completely independent. If humanity was building alliances with them, the human government is currently evaluating these proposals, Sarah continued. "We have found that smaller, more focused alliances often prove more effective than large, unwieldy organizations." The implication was clear. While the Galactic Senate struggled with the crisis, humanity was building its own network of allies based on the same principles of cooperation and mutual respect that the Senate had rejected. Senator Growthon of the Crystalline. Hegemony resonated with worried harmonics. Surely the humans would not abandon galactic civilization entirely. "The threat affects all of us." "Humanity has not abandoned anything," Sarah replied. "We simply redirected our efforts toward partners who value what we bring to relationships." She gestured to the tactical displays that still showed the advancing unknown fleets. "These forces have been moving for over 2 years. Human analysts identified the pattern 18 months ago and shared our concerns with this body." The response was illuminating. The chamber fell silent as delegates remembered their reaction to Sarah's original presentation. The proposal they had dismissed so casually had included warnings about exactly the threat they now faced. "However," Sarah continued, "humanity is not vindictive. We wish the Galactic Senate success in resolving these challenges." She moved toward the chamber exit, then paused and turned back. "I will note that the Independent Worlds Alliance has made remarkable progress in the past year. When diverse civilizations work together as equals, respecting each other's strengths and contributing their unique capabilities, they can accomplish things that seemed impossible alone." Commander Torres opened the chamber doors for her. As they prepared to leave, Speaker Blobthun called out desperately, "Ambassador, surely there must be some basis for cooperation? Some way to work together against this common threat?" Sarah stopped at the threshold and looked back at the assembled delegates. For just a moment, her professional demeanor softened slightly. "Speaker Blobthun, cooperation is always possible between civilizations that approach each other as equals. When mutual respect exists, when each party's contributions are valued, remarkable partnerships can develop." She paused, then added, "The Independent Worlds Alliance has demonstrated this principle quite effectively. Perhaps the Senate might consider what they have learned from that example." With that, Sarah Chen walked out of the Galactic Senate chamber for the final time as humanity's representative. Behind her, the delegates sat in stunned silence, finally understanding what they had lost when they chose mockery over partnership. Outside the chamber, Commander Torres asked quietly, "Ma'am, should we tell them about the joint fleet we've assembled with the independent worlds, or the new defense technologies we've developed?" Sarah shook her head. "Let them find their own solutions, Marcus. When they're ready to approach cooperation as equals rather than seeking salvation from their betters, the Independent Worlds Alliance will consider their application." The Galactic Senate had laughed when humans offered partnership. Now, in the silence of humanity's absence, they finally heard the echo of their own short-sightedness. The galaxy's newest alliance was growing stronger every day, built on the principles of mutual respect and shared strength that the ancient Senate had rejected. And somewhere in the dark between stars, human ships patrolled alongside vessels from a dozen other species, all working together to defend their worlds against the approaching storm.